Exhibit 2 and D2 are excluded as cumulative. C2. Right, Mr. Robles? Exhibit A is admitted. C2 with the transcript is cumulative. That's what we've established. That's the dispatch.
The radio dispatch.
Okay, so let me say it this way. Exhibit A, CADS, admitted. Exhibit C2, which is the dispatch, and D2, which is the transcript, is cumulative to the CADS.
Right, but
Go ahead.
I was going to have this witness lay the foundation and have other witnesses testify to the radio tape.
Sure. But it's not being admitted at this time.
I agree.
And then C1A and C1B are admitted.
Yes, the non-emergency one.
Or I should say they haven't been offered yet, but I've discussed each party's position and they're admissible. You may be seated. You may continue.
I'd like to turn your attention away from the CAD report to another record, and that's the non-emergency line
I still have courts 12 up here. So let me have you approach for that.
Sorry, Judge.
Based on your investigation and all the information that you learned, were the 4 officers that saw the shooting and could have provided cover, Detective Sandy, Acting Sergeant Ingram, Officer Perez, and Officer Weimerskirch, aware at the time of the shooting that no one else could provide cover? For example, that Perdue could not fire because Sandy and Weimerskirch were in his line of fire.
Based on my investigation and the radio transmissions given out,
Yes, I believe they had knowledge of that.
So to be clear, because you can take that answer one of two ways, is it correct to say that Detective Sandy, Acting Sergeant Ingram, Officer Perez, and Officer Weimerskirch were aware that there was no one else in the perimeter who could have provided any sort of response or assistance in dealing with Mr. Boyd because they did not have line of sight or line of fire?
Yes, that's correct.
Turn your attention away from the computer-aided dispatch report to the Albuquerque Police Department non-emergency line tapes, as well as the Albuquerque Police Department radio dispatch tapes. Now, during your investigation, is it correct to say you requested the audio files from within the Albuquerque Police Department in which, and I guess more specifically, the non-emergency line recordings and the radio dispatch recordings?
Yes.
How did you obtain those recordings?
I obtained those recordings by making a formal request to APD Communications, where dispatch and the 911 call takers are located, and that is where they maintain custody of the recordings themselves. So when I make a request, I have to make a request using the specific case numbers and the CAD numbers that we had talked about before, and the time frames in which of the recordings that I'm requesting.
Now, how does a police officer, a field services officer, use radio dispatch information in making assessments about what's happening in a call?
Again, when they're dispatched to a call, or if they arrive on scene to something, information may be coming from multiple sources. It may be coming from other officers over the radio, or it may be coming from people on scene with cell phones or things of that nature. So one of the fundamental jobs of the dispatcher is to take in all that information, plug it into the computer, and also put out the most relevant and pertinent and critical information over the radio to the appropriate officers who need that information in order to make appropriate decisions because they have boots on the ground.
I should have asked this question first. How does the Albuquerque Police Department process calls that they receive on their non-emergency line, and how is that information ultimately relayed to an officer in the field?
Similarly to the way a 911 call taker will take it, is that information will be taken down. The dispatcher, or not the dispatcher, the call taker is trained in asking a series of questions that elicit crucial information that may not be, that the person calling in may not think is that relevant or important, but it is relevant and important to police officers. Once they get that information, they then transfer all that information over to the dispatcher, and the dispatcher and the call taker will kind of keep within communication either over the computer or within speaking with each other, and then that information is pushed out over the radio or pushed out over the computer.
Have you had an opportunity to review Officer Perez's Exhibit C1A and C1B, which are the recordings made of the non-emergency telephone calls made by Alexander Thixton to the Albuquerque Police Department?
Yes.
When those calls were made, were they created contemporaneously with the actual telephone calls being made by Mr. Thixton?
Yes.
Are the non-emergency phone call tapes created in the regular course of business?
Yes.
Are the APD non-emergency call tapes kept as a business record by the Albuquerque Police Department?
Yes, they are.
And is Exhibit C1A and C1B a true and accurate recording of the non-emergency calls made by Mr. Thixton on March the 16th, 2016?
Yes.
Or 2014, I'm sorry.
14, yes.
Now, you've had an opportunity to review transcripts that were made of those exhibits of the non-emergency phone calls made by Mr. Thixton. Is that correct?
Yes.
So have you had an opportunity to review the transcripts which have been marked Exhibit D1A and Exhibit D1B that were made of the non-emergency phone calls made by Mr. Thixton?
Yes.
Were you able to compare the accuracy of the words in the transcript with the words that were actually spoken by Mr. Thixton and the radio operator?
Yes.
And how accurate are those transcripts?
They appear to be accurate.
Okay. Now, if you had found a mistake, something that needed to be deleted or added, would you have brought that to our attention?
Yes.
Is there anything that you would have added or deleted because it was incorrect or should be changed in any way?
No, not that I saw.
So at this time, Your Honor, I would like to move Exhibit C1A, C1B, which are the non-emergency recordings of the calls made by Mr. Thixton, and Exhibit D1A, D1B, which are the transcripts of the two non-emergency telephone calls made by Alexander Thixton into evidence.
I think you've already ruled on this.
We have the parties' positions in the record. C1A, C1B, D1A, and D1B are admitted.
At this time, I would like to play Exhibit C1A, the non-emergency call made by Mr. Thixton, along with the running transcript, which is Exhibit D1A, the transcript of Exhibit C1A.
And what did you need it to be on? Was it VGA?
That's right, Your Honor. It's actually up now. So we're all good. Thank you.
Albuquerque Police Operator 4625, how can I help you?
Yes, hi. I've got two homeless living in our back area. We're next to the Sandia Mountains. They've been out there for a month.
Okay, what's the closest cross street, sir?
The closest cross street, major cross street,
No, just the closest cross streets to the area where they're at.
it's going to be Piedra Vista Road Northeast. And let me look up the other one here. Piedra Vista Road Northeast and La Cueva Avenue Northeast. I'm sorry.
I have a La Cueva and Piedra Larga. But La Cueva and Piedra Vista don't intersect.
Okay, yeah, I guess it becomes Piedra Larga, near that cross section.
Okay, and so they're directly east of you off of Piedra Vista?
Correct. So they're in the National Forest area, in that open space that's behind there. There's a cluster of rocks they've been kind of living in for the past month. And I went up there today and I found all their belongings. They have a tarp up there. They have like backpacks and food and stuff. So basically, they've been living out there for a while. And I don't know if that's within the police's jurisdiction or if that's the open space division or
Well, we have
national
open space, so...
Okay.
Now, east of you, how far back?
It's about 100 yards back away from my backyard.
Okay.
If you know where you...
What is your actual address?
It's 812 Piedra Vista Road Northeast. Uh, 812 Piedra Vista Road Northeast, 87123.
Now, are those individuals there right now?
I don't think they're there at this time, but they usually come in later in the evening and they leave early in the morning.
About how many of them?
Two of them.
Now, did you leave all of that stuff there?
Yes,
Okay.
everything's there. The mound that they're on is called U, like the letter U, mound.
Okay.
And they're kind of at the base of it.
And your name, sir?
It's Alexander Pixton, T-H.
And this 937 number is a good number to reach you back at?
That's correct.
Okay, sir, I'll get an officer out as soon as I can to check the situation. Do you want them to also make contact with you when they go out?
Yes, please. I can show them to where the site is at.
Okay.
And I'd be happy for them to come up. I got a call, I think it was 3 weeks ago, because they had a verbal altercation out there.
Okay.
And I think the police just drove down the road. I don't think they actually visited the site, but they're still there.
Okay, we'll get officers out as soon as we can.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Now, was one of the homeless men identified by Mr. Thixton, later identified as James Boyd?
Yes.
And you would agree with me that about 4:24 p.m. on this day in March, Alexander Thixton called a second time that Mr. Boyd is back at his camp.
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, I would like to play Exhibit C1B, the 911, or I should say the non-emergency phone call made, along with Exhibit D1B, which is the transcript, and they will be played together.
Albuquerque Police Operator 4625, how can I help you?
Yes, hi. I'm just calling up to follow up on the police response to the... I called earlier about a homeless man who's living in the open space area behind her backyard. Are you the same operator I talked to?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, he came back, so the guy's there right now.
Okay.
At his area. I just wanted to have an idea of how long it would take for the policeman to, arrive.
I have no idea. It just depends on how long it takes them to clear the calls that they're already on.
Okay. And you have the address as 812 Piedra Vista Road Northeast? Okay. All righty. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
Now I'd like to turn your attention, Detective Stone, to the dispatch of the open space officers to 812 Piedra Vista. And would you agree with me that from your review of the CAD report, you learned that at about 4:30 p.m., that APD operator dispatched John McDaniel and Officer Patrick Hernandez to 812 Piedra Vista Road Northeast?
Yes.
Okay. And from the CAD, are you able to show us how you know that that was the time that they were dispatched?
Would you like me to explain what's
Yes.
on the screen? So if you look over in the left-hand column, you'll see a series of timestamps. So the first timestamp you're going to see is 16:30:31, which is 4:30 p.m. DISP is dispatch. 1520 Adam, that's going to be the call sign of Officer John McDaniel. And the reason for the 1520 Adam is because he was the acting sergeant at the open space at that particular time. And the P and the 3275, that's just going to be the kind of like a badge number, a man number for him. And he is dispatched as the primary unit, so which means he's going to be the primary investigator for the actual call itself.
How do you know that Officer McDaniel is the primary from this CAD?
Because when it says PRIU for primary unit, and you go over and it shows which call sign is going to be the primary unit, and that's 1520 Adam.
I apologize, I interrupted you. Would you please explain how you know that Officer Patrick Hernandez was dispatched at approximately 4:31?
So again, 16:31, so 4:31 p.m. Again, you see a dispatch right here. 1522 is going to be his call sign. His man number is 3394, and the officer's name is Patrick Hernandez.
Now, you also learned from your review of the CAD report that these officers were dispatched to A12 Piedra Vista with regard to a homeless camp. Is that right?
That's correct.
Would you please explain what this particular CAD notation says? Explain to us what the 10 codes are and things of that nature.
Sure. So we're seeing 1557 here, that's 3:57 p.m., the entry. So that's when the call is actually created. So you're going to see it was before the officers are actually dispatched, just because the call had been sitting there waiting to be dispatched to whichever officer was available. So whenever there's an entry as far as comments that are going to be added to the CAD, you're going to see the comment right here. And that's what's going to be indicating to the officer, hey, read this. So it basically just east of Piedra Vista in the open space area, approximately 100 yards from Caller. So CLR is just short for Caller. From Caller's backyard, there is a homeless camp set up at U-Mound. Caller has noticed 2 subjects living in the rocks for the past month. 25 Caller, he can show units here. 1025 is the 10 code for contact.
Now, you would agree with me that at approximately 4:41 p.m. on this Sunday afternoon, Officer McDaniel arrived on scene?
Yes, that's correct.
And we know that from the CAD report.
Yes, you see the timestamp for the 4:41 and then on scene.
And you would agree with me that at 4:48, Officer Patrick Hernandez arrived on scene?
Correct, 4:48 and then again on scene.
Now, when responding to a call like this, would you agree that a police officer has a duty to investigate the violations that are brought to his or her attention?
If there are violations, then yes, that is a requirement of our job.
And you would agree with me that there is a particular city ordinance that addresses whether someone can camp in the open space, is that right?
That's correct.
And you would agree with me that Officer McDaniel, Officer Hernandez were sent to investigate a suspect who was camping in the city open space?
Correct.
And you would agree with me that according to city ordinance, that a person cannot camp in the open space without a permit, is that right?
That is correct.
And that if someone violates this particular city ordinance, camping without a permit, that's a misdemeanor crime?
It is a misdemeanor, that's correct.
So you would agree with me that both Officer Hernandez and Officer McDaniel were there to investigate a misdemeanor crime?
That's correct.
Now, you would agree with me that despite the fact that Mr. Boyd is homeless, that the Albuquerque Police Department officers who responded to this particular call had a responsibility to go out and determine how they were going to handle this misdemeanor infraction. Is that right?
Yes.
And that these officers, Officers McDaniel and Officer Hernandez, had a certain amount of discretion built into their job.
Yes, they do.
So an officer, for example, could go and investigate a call such as this involving a homeless man living in the open space and decide that they weren't going to issue a citation. Is that right?
That's correct.
An officer also has the discretion to issue a citation.
Correct.
And again, if the officer in the course of investigating a misdemeanor crime like this, if they encounter other crimes that they witness, they can take action on those crimes. Is that fair to say?
That's true.
So when an officer arrives at a situation like this, you would agree with me that, or I should say, you would agree with me that Officer Hernandez and Officer McDaniel were there to investigate whatever criminal activity, arose during the course of their encounter with Mr. Boyd.
That is true.
Now, at approximately 5:01 p.m., is it true that Officer McDaniel asked to 10-3 the air?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now, what does it mean when when a police officer of the Albuquerque Police Department reads, the air is 10-3?
10-3 is the 10 code for clear the air. And what that means is if a particular officer who, at this point in time, 1520 Adam, who's Officer John McDaniel, called over the air and to the dispatcher and said 10-3 the air, that is an indicator, one, that something out of the ordinary is now happening on that call. An officer will not 10-3 the air if it's for a lack of better terms, if it's just a routine call. The air will be cleared for that officer, and it's an indicator for all of the officers who are listening to the radio that something's going on in that scene that may require more officers, and those officers may need help. It also means that no other officer should be getting on the radio and doing any kind of normal business like calling out traffic stops, asking assistance on their call for routine stuff, because it means that whoever has the air 10-3 or cleared means that something is probably rapidly evolving in that situation, and they're going to need the radio to request resources and further help.
Now, at approximately 5:02, the radio dispatcher operator notes, subject at gunpoint, air is 10-3.
That's correct.
What does it mean when you read something like this, subject is at gunpoint, air is 10-3? What does that mean to an officer?
When that's put out over the radio, or if they read that over the CAD, subject at gunpoint, that's an indicator to other officers that something violent is happening, or something, a rapidly evolving violent situation is happening. And officers have obviously risen to a level where they felt the need to draw their guns. So again, it's another indicator that something on that call is not going right, or is the tensions are rising.
Now, during the course of this investigation, did you take the time to actually look at the CAD and the statements that were made in the CAD and compare them to the statements that were made over the air, that is the radio dispatches, to ensure that what's on the CAD was actually said on the radio?
Yes.
Is it correct to say that at approximately 5:02 that over the radio, Albuquerque Police Department officers who were listening to the radio would have heard, subject is at gunpoint, air is 10-3?
Yes.
And at this point, I would like to ask you about the APD radio dispatch tape, and to lay a foundation as you understand it. You obtained the APD radio dispatch tape from APD, is that right?
APD Communications, that's correct.
Now, when the Albuquerque Police Department creates radio tapes, are they created contemporaneously with the radio communications that the tapes are recording?
Yes.
Are the radio tapes kept in the regular course of business by the Albuquerque Police Department?
Yes.
Are the Albuquerque Police Department radio tapes business records?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, I would like to have a ruling on the on having laid a proper foundation for the admissibility of these records under the business records exception to the rule here against hearsay.
So I thought you'd already ruled on cumulative grounds.
My understanding is not offering it at this time. He just wants to verify that the foundation has been laid.
I will agree to that, Judge, but I'm maintaining the cumulative factors.
Sure.
So there's a finding that you've laid that sufficient foundation.
And at this time, I would like to ask you about a transcript that was made, and that's Exhibit D2, the transcript of the APD radio dispatch tapes. Did you have an opportunity during your preparation for this case to review a transcript that was made by a court reporter of the APD radio dispatch tapes?
Yes.
Did you review that transcript to ensure that the words that were actually spoken on the radio were in fact the words that were transcribed?
Yes.
And did you take an opportunity to, if there was one, if there was a mistake, if there was something that needed to be deleted or added, that you would have let us know?
Yes.
Now, did you find any mistakes that you identified with regards to the transcript accurately stating what was said over the radio?
No.
Is it correct to say that Exhibit D2 is a true and accurate transcript of Exhibit C2, which is the APD radio dispatch?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, I would request a ruling on that the transcript is admissible but won't be used at this time.
Judge, I think the foundation has been laid, but we would maintain our cumulative objection to the opposite.
Sure. Foundation has been laid.
Okay. Turning your attention back to the incident. From the time the officers first arrived at 448 until the arrival of backup officers at 506, did you find any evidence that Boyd had threatened the lives of officers Hernandez and McDaniel?
Yes.
Okay. What evidence shows that that Mr. Boyd was threatening the lives of those officers?
Based on my review of the taser video and the statements taken by the officers.
I believe what's already been admitted into evidence, Your Honor, although we have them labeled as Officer Perez's Exhibit B1A, and that is Officer McDaniel's taser camera video, as well as what's already been admitted to evidence, but we have it labeled as Exhibit D3, the transcript of Exhibit B1, which is the taser video. And at this time, I'd like to play a portion of it when the court is ready.
Any objection?
I would object on a cumulative basis. If it's the same portion, if it's a different portion, I have no objection to it.
Let me just get clarification. Are you wanting to admit B1A and D3?
They've already been admitted by stipulation, but I have them
But
identified.
you just want to use them for your question?
Yes, I will play a portion of this video, and I will identify specifically what I'm playing and what portion of the transcript that I will have running at the same time.
You may play it.
Okay. I'd like to play at this time Exhibit B1A from the 1 minute 59 mark to the 2 minute, I'm sorry. The 1 minute and 59 mark to the 2 minute and 8 second mark, and then play from the Exhibit D3, the transcript, page 5, line 13 through page 5, line 21.
Okay, keep your hands out of your pocket. I'm only going to view you. Cover the air. From the knife to the end of proper trailhead.
I don't know that that played properly. May I play it again, Your Honor?
Okay, keep your hands out of your pocket. I'm only going to view you. Cover the air. From the knife to the end of proper trailhead.
And then there's another section of the video that I'd like to play at this time, of Exhibit B1A, and the time is the 5 minute 26 mark to the 5 minute 39 mark. It will run concurrently with Exhibit D2, the transcript, which is from page 12, line 1 to page 12, line 6.
Here we go. Take your hand out of your pocket. I'm almost at the stage right now. Let you sit down. Don't move in another direction.
You would agree with me that in the two video clips that were shown, that Mr. Boyd threatened the lives of Officers Hernandez and Officer McDaniel, is that right?
That's correct.
And based on your training and experience, what type of crime is this?
Aggravated assault on a police officer.
And what type of crime in terms of the level of severity is aggravated assault on a police officer?
It's a felony crime.
Now, when you say aggravated assault, why is it aggravated instead of just simply assault?
Due to the fact that James Boyd was armed with deadly weapons.
So when a person threatens to hurt an officer with a weapon, that's what makes it an aggravated crime.
Correct.
And because an aggravated assault is being committed against a police officer, you would agree with me that that particular crime is a higher level of felony.
Yes.
Now, you had mentioned that Mr. Boyd had threatened the officers with a deadly weapon. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, at this time, what I'd like to do is to show you a series of photographs, and those photographs will be marked Exhibit, or this Officer Perez's Exhibit E1, E2, E3, and E4. And once I have them, I'm going to approach you with the court's permission, have you look at them, and then we can talk about them after you've done so. Take this back. And please let me know when you've had a chance to review those.
And Your Honor, thank you for changing it, but we'll present it tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay.
I presented you with exhibits E1 through E4. What are they?
They are the photographs of the knives around where James Boyd, where the incident occurred, that he had, and they were on the ground, and criminalistics took photos of them.
Okay. Are those the knives with which Mr. Boyd was armed?
They appear to be, yes.
Okay. Is exhibit E1 through E4 are fair and accurate photographs of the knives which Mr. Boyd used to threaten Officer McDaniel and Officer Hernandez?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, I would like to move into admission into evidence exhibits E1 through E4.
No objection, Your Honor.
E1 through E4 admitted.
So I'd first like to show exhibit E1. Would you please explain what is shown in the photograph labeled E1?
Yes, so what you're seeing here, I'll direct your attention first to the knife. It's a black folding knife with the blade, a silver blade out, and it's on the ground. Next to it, you'll see a yellow cone marked K2. That's what I was referring to earlier in the day about when criminalistics will mark pertinent evidence that needs to be photographed and collected. So the numerics, they will have different type of letter number combinations for whatever they are collecting. So for instance, K, knife, because knife starts with a K, and then 2, which means it's going to be the second knife that they put the marker down to collect.
Now I'd like to turn your attention to exhibit E2. And once we've done so, I'd like for you to explain what is shown or depicted in exhibit E2.
Yeah, so this is going to be a photograph after the knife was already collected from where it was found when investigators got on the scene. And you can tell because the criminalistic detectives have placed a sticky note on the little ruler here. And the first number that you're going to see, which is this number right here, is going to be the case number that is associated with this investigation. And then you're also going to see the date of the actual photograph. It is going to be after the knife was already collected, taken to evidence, and when Detective Nate Render is now performing his further analysis of the evidence. K2, again, that's just indicating that this is going to be the same knife from when you saw the marker out on scene, K2, and then you have the initials here, NR, for Nate Render.
Now I'd like to have you turn your attention to exhibit E3. If you could just clear the screen as well. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. What is depicted in exhibit E3?
E3 is going to be another black folding knife, similar to the one that you saw earlier. Again, it's on the ground with the blades out, and it's going to have the criminalistics yellow marker for knife 3.
How do you know that the knives were found with the blades open as opposed to the knives being found with the blades closed and then subsequently open?
When photographs are taken of evidence on scene, they're taken how they are found. So there's no manipulation of the evidence until photographs are taken. So that way we know later on, months down the road, when I'm reviewing everything, or weeks down the road, when I'm reviewing all the photos and everything, I know that that's what the evidence looked like when investigators first found it.
So it's fair to say that the knife shown in exhibit E1, which was K2, was found with the knife blade open, is that right?
Correct.
And it's fair to say that with regard to what is shown in exhibit E3, K3, which is another knife, that knife was found with the blade open.
Correct.
Now I'd like to have you turn your attention to E4. Again, you explained much of it, but just to simply distinguish what's shown in this particular photograph, which is exhibit E4, that is just a little bit different than E2.
Yes, so again, this is going to be another part of Nate Render's examination at the crime lab. He's photographing the knife so we see exactly how long it is. And you know it's a different knife because of the K3 as opposed to the K2.
Now, based on your review of the evidence, I believe you testified that that Mr. Boyd had committed the crime of aggravated assault on a peace officer against Officer Hernandez and Officer McDaniels. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, based on your investigation, did you find any evidence that Officer McDaniel, Officer Hernandez acted inappropriately or improperly in the way that they responded to the dispatch to investigate a homeless camper in the open space?
Objection, Your Honor, open issue.
Overruled.
As far as their initial approach and response to the call,
Yes.
the dispatch call, no, I didn't find anything wrong.
It's correct to say that Mr. Boyd made threatening statements to Officer Hernandez and Officer McDaniel.
Yes.
That while those threatening statements were made, Mr. Boyd was armed with 2 folding knives,
Yes.
and the blades were open on those folding knives. Is that right?
Yes.
And that those knives were deadly weapons in the way that they were being used.
Yes.
Now, based on your training and experience, you would agree with me that the crime of aggravated assault on a police officer is an inherently violent crime. Is that right?
Yes.
And that a law enforcement officer, when having seen the commission of the crime of aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer, has the authority to arrest the individual who committed that crime.
That's correct.
And in order to take an individual into custody who has committed that crime, aggravated assault against a police officer, a law enforcement officer has the authority to use a reasonable amount of force to take that person into custody.
Objection, Your Honor, an ultimate issue, and not an expert.
We're talking about McDaniel and Hernandez?
Yes.
You may ask the question.
Could you restate the question? Sorry.
You would agree with me that a law enforcement officer, such as Officer McDaniel and Officer Hernandez, had the lawful authority to arrest Mr. Boyd after they witnessed him commit the crime of aggravated assault on a peace officer against those 2 officers.
Yes.
And that those officers would have the authority to use a reasonable amount of force to take Mr. Boyd into custody.
That's correct.
And despite the fact that Mr. Boyd was mentally ill, those officers would still have the authority to take him into custody. Is that right?
That is correct.
Now I'd like to turn your attention to the dispatch of the APD patrol officers to 812 Piedra Vista. And you would agree with me that at approximately 5:02, that's when the APD radio dispatcher dispatched Sergeant Jason Carpenter.
That's correct.
Now, looking at this particular CAD statement, what do you know about the way that Sergeant Carpenter was dispatched and his rank and his role in this case?
Okay, yeah, so at 5:02, you can see that he's dispatched as backup for the officers that are requesting assistance. So his call sign is going to be Sam 55. The Sam indicator is going to be is what the call sign for the sergeants. So since he's in the Foothills Area Command, which is all the beats up there are the 500 series, he's going to be a sergeant in the Foothills Area Command. And then the other 5 is just to designate what shift he works. But this is, again, just his man number and then his name.
Now, at about that same time, isn't it true that Officer Christopher Wetterlin was sent as a backup officer? Is that right?
Correct.
And we note that from the CAD report in the same way?
Yes, he is dispatched as backup and his call sign Bike 58, because as I say, he's a bike officer.
Now, at 5:04 p.m., the APD operator dispatches Officer Michael Monette. Is that right?
Yes, dispatches him as backup, and he's Frank 531.
Okay. Now, from your review of the CAD, it's correct to say that at 5:06, Officer Monet arrived on scene.
Yes, correct. Frank 531, which is his call sign, shows him on scene.
And at about 5:08, that's when Sergeant Carpenter arrived?
Yeah, correct. Bike 58, which is Christopher Wetterlin, is on scene, and
there's that statement there, are 56 with less lethal. What does that mean?
So when they went 56, they called out on the radio that they have 56 is the 10 code for arrived on scene, and they're putting out over the radio that they have now arrived on scene and they will be deploying with the less lethal means of force.
Now, why is it important? Why would an APD officer report that they're responding with less lethal to a call?
For a couple different reasons. It's good to keep a record of when the less lethal means of force arrive on scene, and it's also letting other officers that are arriving in the area that, okay, less lethal is going up, and they may need to bring additional less lethal, or they may need to just deploy as lethal cover officers.
Now, Officer Brock Niprath arrived subsequent, is that right?
That's correct.
And from this CAD report, are you able to determine how or why Officer Niprath showed up to the scene?
Because it says that he's on scene.
Okay, so you would agree with me that there's nothing to indicate that Brock Niprath was ever dispatched to this scene?
I don't remember if I saw I'd have to go over to see if there was a dispatch for him.
But it wouldn't be unusual for an officer who hears a call where the air was 10-3, that is, silenced, and that there's a suspect at gunpoint, for an officer to sort of self-dispatch, is that right?
Yes, that is correct. They have the ability to do that.
Now, when is an officer supposed to self-dispatch?
Supposed to self-dispatch, I don't know when they're supposed to, but they have the ability to self-dispatch when they go to certain calls. Now, because the air was 10-3, he's not going to tie up the air by saying, log me on the call or I'm en route. He's going to use the computer to log himself onto the call so he's not wasting radio time.
I see that it's 5 o'clock, and this might be a good time to...
Okay. We'll recess. I need to talk to the attorneys before I determine what time to have the jury come back, so let me have you approach quickly. And so tomorrow at 8:20, I'll have you return to the jury room on the first floor. And let me just highlight those things, covered in memorize that you're not to discuss this case with any other jurors or any person at all. And you're not allowed to allow anyone else to discuss the case in your presence. You must not conduct any independent research. You have to avoid all news accounts, no matter what form. And you're not to express any opinion about the case or form any fixed opinion until the entire case is completed and submitted to you. Thank you again for your patience today. I know it was a long day. Have a pleasant evening, and I appreciate you getting back to the first floor jury assembly room at 8:20, and we'll bring you up again today at 8:30 and try to get as much done as we can. Thank you. Please stand for the jury.